What do you think these teens have in common? Let's listen to the stories and find out. I didn't know I was an addict. Justin Geller is 16. They say that you can be born an addict, and I think that's true for me. From the moment I tried marijuana, I wanted more. Heroin, though, was something I said I'd never do. That was a dirty drug, nothing like the stuff I used. What I realize now is that you might say, I'll only smoke weed, but sooner or later, other drugs will get put in front of you. And by then, you might say yes. That's how I ended up trying pills. Then heroin. While I was using drugs, my parents and I fought constantly. Sometimes the police even came, but I didn't care. All I wanted was to get high. Eventually, my mom said I couldn't live with her unless I went to rehab. After a few weeks of sleeping in my car, I finally caved. I'll be honest, I fully expected to come back and start using again. But when I started getting clean, things changed. I learned about addiction, how one person can try a drug and move on, while for another, it's instant. Now I know I'll always be an addict. When people warn you about drugs like weed and prescription pills, listen. I'm only 18, and I've already made choices that will determine the rest of my life. My memory is affected. I have drug related tattoos. You just never know what a drug will do to you until it's too late. Hannah Geller, 16. The first time I knew my brother Justin had a problem, he was 13 and I was 10, and we got a call that he had overdosed on prescription pain pills at a party. When he survived, I think my parents thought it would be a wake up call, but it was just the beginning of a painful period of fighting and run ins with the law. Over time, the craziness became routine. I remember my mom picking me up one day and saying, Well, I spent last night with the police. Your brother got caught with drugs again. She said it conversationally, how you would talk to a friend. People started to make assumptions about our family, that my mom was a bad parent, that we must live in a dirty house in a bad neighborhood. I hadn't done anything wrong, but I still got labeled. The thing is, drugs don't discriminate. Addiction can happen to anybody. Eventually, my parents, who are divorced, decided they needed to get tough. My dad kicked Justin out, and my mom told him he had to go to rehab if he wanted to live with us. Justin didn't think he had a problem, so he wouldn't go. Those weeks were terrifying. I didn't know where he was or if he'd still be alive when I woke up in the morning. He'd call crying, begging to come home. I cried right along with him. Justin finally agreed to get help, and when my mom found him a spot in an out of state program, he had to leave immediately. I was at school, so all I could do was duck into a stairwell to say bye on the phone. It's been 6 months, and Justin does seem better. I think he's clean. I hope he is. Another story of an athlete. When you think of a heroin addict, you think of someone who's strung out, someone you could never be. At least that's what I thought, until senior year of high school when I was captain of the wrestling team, part of a loving family, and carrying a serious heroin addiction. I started by drinking a little and smoking marijuana, but it wasn't until a friend offered me prescription pain pills that I got hooked. Then a guy I knew said, Here, try this. It's basically the same thing but cheaper. It was heroin, and while I told myself I'd never do hardcore street drugs, at that moment I needed it to avoid withdrawal symptoms. After graduation, my life went into a tailspin. I did things I never imagined doing, like stealing money from my family. I knew I needed to get sober, and I tried, but I always hit a wall. Finally, my mom got me a spot in a rehabilitation program in Florida. I've been away for 6 months, first there and then in a sober living house. I've been working so I have money in the bank, which never would have happened before. I just bought a truck and I'm planning to use it to start a lawn care business. I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but I'm happy right now. That's a start. Think about the path of addiction for the teens and the stories you just heard. What can you learn about the path of addiction of heroin? How are the teens' lives and their families' lives impacted by their heroin addiction?